Joining me this morning, I'd like to say, is Tom Slater, editor of Spiked Online. Thank you very much for joining us. I want to get your thoughts on what's been going on in Israel in a few moments' time. But obviously the focus is all about reform, Nigel Farage, and what to do about illegal migrants today. Nigel Farage still on stage, looking quite animated, I have to say, talking about his plan to deal with illegal migration. Operation Restoring Justice, it's being called. He has been talking about how without action on immigration there is a genuine threat to public order. I think he's right on that, isn't he? He says the mood in the country is a mix between total despair and rising anger. I think that's a fair summary. And he says we have to leave the European Convention on Human Rights, ECHR, no ifs, no buts. He said it might have been a good idea over 80 years ago, but not now. And he says the only way we will stop the boats is by detaining and deporting absolutely anyone who comes via that route. If you come to the UK illegally, you will be detained, you will be deported. And he insists he is the only party leader who can be trusted on illegal immigration. I can't think of anything I disagree with there, Tom Slater. What about you?
Well, what we've already had the detail briefed. I suppose what we've got now is the rhetoric. And again, I think this is something that a hell of a lot of people...
Usually the other way round, isn't it?
We've got a hell of a lot of people who will sympathise a lot with what he's saying. I mean, I think one key line in his speech so far was he turns to Keir Starmer, figuratively speaking, and says, whose side are you on?
Yep.
That's a really powerful argument when you have a country which has overwhelmingly, election after election, even some referenda that we could talk about, voted to control the borders, to bring down immigration, particularly to crack down on illegal immigration, which I think across the spectrum of British society everyone realises is a huge problem. And yet it's never happened. You're now lumbered with a government, a Labour government, which isn't even really pretending to take this issue seriously. I mean, it does a little bit around the edges.
Oh,
but
they're definitely making an attempt at pretending.
Oh, that's but
no one.
I don't want to be unfair to them. They are trying to
They've
pretend.
detained 100 people. I mean, more than 100 people come across every day.
Yep.
They've detained 100 people. I'm assuming all young men.
They managed to get the
and
French,
they're going to deport them, apparently.
They managed to get the French to film one video of them knifing a dinghy, and that was great guns. I mean, it's one of those things where this issue has obviously been building for a long time. To see the Conservative Party running around and criticising the Labour government for continuing to open hotels, even though they're the ones who opened those hotels, is it sticks in the craw. But right now, you've got Labour carrying the can for decades' worth of failures in this area. They have no response to it.
I'm going to say this, they started it. Tony Blair started it.
And Reform are clearly spying that point where they can, first of all, come up with some clear-cut solutions which command public support, which I think most of the things that we're talking about will command public support. But also they've got the credibility. No one, when Keir Starmer says he's smashed the gangs, no one believed them. When the Tories say anything on this issue, quite rightly the response is, where were you for the past 14 years? Where this is the opening, the kind of historic opening that Reform have been handed by the failure of those two other parties.
And he's not Johnny come lately to this, following the polls. This is something he has been, Nigel Farage has been talking about for years, and has been accused of being a bigot, far-right, racist, Nazi, xenophobe, you name it. He's been talking about this stuff, and more people are now aware of it. An awful lot of people who are not concerned about this issue, and this is in the top 3 polling issues, and then we're told by the great and the good, oh, well, if you're much more concerned about the pound in your pocket or about your child's future or the NHS. Well, yeah, we are concerned about those things, but we'd have more pounds in our pocket if we didn't have people in asylum hotels costing the country billions every year. And we would have a much nicer future for our children if they weren't actually feeling unsafe and weren't literally unsafe on the streets as a result of having a migrant hotel near them. You talk about crime. We say, again, these aren't all illegal migrants, but there is a serious issue that we need to address when it comes to access to schools, access to the NHS. Because no, not every person who comes from abroad is working in the NHS. Can we all stop this abject nonsense? Access to housing, social housing in particular, the taxes that we're paying, the criminality we are seeing on our streets. There is a clear link between all of those and migration as a whole, certainly mass uncontrolled migration. Now that includes both legal and illegal. I think everyone who's sane's number one concern is illegal migration. Is people, young men largely of fighting age, turning up on boats, having paid people smugglers, 100%. If people genuinely still think most of these people are asylum seekers, they are simply not paying attention. They really, really are not. Now, one of the interesting things that Nigel Farage has just been asked by, I mean, you'll never guess who, Channel 4 News. I know, what a surprise. They asked Nigel Farage how it would sit with him if there was a case of someone being deported back to their home country who was then tortured or killed as a result of arriving back in that country. Nigel Farage replied, "We cannot be responsible for all the sins that take place. The primary duty of a British government is to protect its own people." Now, I think 5 years ago, he would have been wary of saying that. I think he might have thought it, but been wary of saying it. I think even 2 years ago. I think now the public mood has changed so much that people are just like, yeah, I don't care. When I hear about migrants dying in the Channel and they drown, I'm really sorry. I kind of shrug now. I'm just like, you knew the risks, you took the stupid risk, you were perfectly safe somewhere. If you're in France, you're perfectly safe. You're not fleeing France. I fled France on an EasyJet flight, yesterday. Do you know what I mean? It's nonsense. I think people are just saying, you know what? It's not our problem anymore. I don't care. Not our problem.
On the point of people dying in the Channel, it's one of those things where I'm always really struck by the fact that you will have these hypothetical situations asked of Nigel Farage by Channel 4 News saying, what if one person who's sent back to an Afghanistan or an Eritrea or whatever it might be, what happens if they ended up actually being tortured? The question is never flipped on the other side of this argument. What about every time that you're having people dying making these crossings, not just across the English Channel, also into the Mediterranean? All these things are kind of connected in terms of how people are moving through the continent. I think people would recognise it's a slightly facile argument to hang every death around the necks of people who are allowing this situation to continue. And also I think what we could end up, because of the fact that governments across Europe are all shifting pretty much in the same direction on this issue right now, it opens up another question about, well, maybe what we need to look afresh at this issue. If refuge needs to be provided, it needs to be provided in neighbouring countries, safe, but still not, incentivising people to traipse halfway across the world. Maybe the question of processing in other places, again, safe, provided for, but not.
But again, I don't even know if it's our problem.
That's something which will potentially.
But like Eritreans fleeing, repressive government and whatever conscription in Eritrea. Well, the vast majority of those people, I think, are in Chad. Well then go to Chad. It's Chad's problem. They're the neighbouring country. I just think people are getting to that point. And by the way, Channel 4 should equally ask the question, and I think Nigel Farage's response should be, how will it sit with you if someone is not deported back home and they rape a child or rape a woman? I mean, or they kill someone. How we've got cases, about to go to the courts of alleged assaults by asylum seekers, people claiming illegal migrants living in these hostels. And again, I'm not to prejudice any trials, but there have been cases where people have been convicted on such charges. So if anyone gets sent home by our government and then they end up facing retribution, we're responsible. But okay, so if you don't want people sent home, every time someone is the victim of a crime by someone who is here illegally, you're responsible. I mean, have that on your head. And again, I'm with Nigel Farage. I don't think these people are our responsibility. If they genuinely fear going home, then we'll send you somewhere else. We'll send you to the Ascension Islands, which do not look a particularly hospitable place. But I mean, if you're that worried about your safety, you'd be happy to go there. But let's just go through some more of what they were announcing today. So detaining and deporting all illegal boat arrivals. Now that would be people who've arrived already. But my guess is, the aim would be to get people who've already arrived here. We've got a backlog, 120,000, 150,000. The reality is, though, are you going to be able to get those people? Because as soon as they're in power, I mean, those people are just going to disappear. I mean, they're just going to disappear into the black market. But no bail, no right of appeal, a statutory duty on the Home Secretary to deport. They're going to build facilities. They're going to have military bases that are no longer used, and they're going to build new detention centres. I mean, I had an entire year in a porter cabin at my comp, and we all lived. I'm pretty sure that we can put a load of porter cabins or equivalent up. They're going to detain, they say, 24,000 people. But bearing in mind, the moment you start doing that, people are going to stop coming. So you're not dealing with an ongoing problem. You're constantly dealing with the past problem at that point. They want to have a new offence for illegal entry, so you can never claim asylum. There will also be voluntary deportation. They'll give you £2,500, free flight home, bye-bye, 5 charter flights a day, RAF planes for people if the airlines won't take them. Interestingly, Zia Youssef, who was the chair of the party, he said that tearing up identity documents will become a criminal offence, punishable by up to 5 years in prison. I have no idea how you could possibly ever prove that someone has torn up their identity documents.
I mean, maybe that's more signalling than it is anything more substantial.
But don't do signalling. Don't do signalling. You've got enough.
What are you going to do? I mean, you're going to have evidence of them.
I dropped it in. Did you deliberately drop it in the channel, or did you? Yeah. I mean, actually, often what is the case is that the people smugglers keep their documents. That's part of the deal. But basically, he says when Nigel is Prime Minister, no human rights lawyer will ever be allowed to block a deportation flight. I mean, that I'm with them all the way on this. I say happy to deport to Afghanistan, Iran, Eritrea, wherever. They will deport to Rwanda or Albania if necessary, or the Ascension Islands. But also, crucially, we're looking at scrapping the Human Rights Act, leaving the European Convention on Human Rights, derogating the Refugee Convention, all the human rights sort of furniture that stops us doing a lot of this stuff, we are told right now. And the new British Bill of Rights, including the First Amendment style rights of free speech. I mean, those are sort of, I suppose, separate to this. But a government saying, a reform government, if they get elected, and the polls keep being pretty sure they will, Operation Restoring Justice. That is how I think most people will see it.
No, absolutely. I think restoring common sense as well. I mean, this is one thing that Farage said in some of his interviews leading up to his big press conference today, was that it wasn't actually that long ago that the British state, even under New Labour, even under Tony Blair, recognised that you couldn't just essentially turn a blind eye to illegal migration. The fact that you had David Blunkett, the former New Labour Home Secretary, coming out in recent days and saying, at least temporarily, the European Convention on Human Rights needs to be suspended. We need to get a grip on this particular issue. Reminds you that, yes, you know, in large part, these problems and the kind of dysfunction that we've seen in our asylum system is a relatively recent phenomenon. It's something because partly governments and the state have just totally lost control, but also because they've been captured by an ideology or just by a general kind of mood and vibe that it's somehow grubby, unfair, unpleasant to enforce your own borders to any degree whatsoever. So I think what we're really seeing here is, I think what a lot of people will see, what Farage is talking about today, is not necessarily some radical departure from where we have been for many, many years in the post-war period of UN conventions and human rights. I think they'll see it as a return to just the kind of mean, the return to what was sensible, what felt like 5 minutes ago.
Well, and that's the thing. Again, this is just so completely at a different scale, isn't it? Nigel Farage has been asked in the last few moments about what about women and children under this migration policy, because it is largely men, and he's confirmed that women and children would be detained under the migration policy. Bearing in mind, of course, when they were talking, I think previously under the Tories, of they wouldn't detain women, they wouldn't deport women and children. Then there was going to be already a market, and all the experts, the border force experts that we will speak to, pointed out there would then be a market, that will supply a woman that you can claim is your wife and a child. You're then looking at even more exploitation of people. But he did admit, he said that the issue of unaccompanied children was much more complicated. But again, these people, they are turning up, they're being put on these boats by adults, for goodness sake. So we're into different territory there. But again, we're not talking about things on the same scale. And again, we're talking often about, if you're talking about unaccompanied children, you're talking about a 17-year-old young man in lots of cases. And scale
is the point. You've got to reduce the scale of this, because we can talk about edge cases all day, but the fact is there are so many cases, it becomes very difficult to discuss
and there will be people who are genuinely seeking refuge, seeking asylum. But again, why are you doing it here? Why not in, say, Chad or in any other European country you've passed through? None of you have arrived in England just out of the blue. We've got people who are claiming asylum from Pakistan, for God's sake, from India. I mean, this is utterly, utterly ridiculous. It really is. I'd love to hear your reaction to this, from what you've heard from Nigel Farage so far today. And see, Yusuf, what do you make of this? Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk in your message to 87222. Get in touch with us on X at Talk TV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs £1, standard network rate message. But as you know, I mean, my audience and Tom, you'll know, if I don't think a policy makes sense, I called them out on Ukraine. This nonsense about allowing trans-identified male prisoners in women's prisons. This is not official policy, but Nigel Farage said he'd be guided by their advisor on this. I call it out. I always call it out on this. I'm yet to find something I don't like, other than I think this tearing up identity documents. I just don't think you can prove that, and it's a waste of everyone's time. But the willingness, for instance, to refuse, to use leverage against countries, refuse to take their people back. Yeah, Pakistan, you don't want your people back, fine, no more visas. Frankly, I'm pretty sure we should be cutting some of the routes anyway for people who are coming from countries where we've got a known issue of criminality. This ties into something Rupert Lowe, former Reform UK MP, has pointed out. He instigated this sort of rape gang inquiry. It's nothing judicial, it's not got any statutory rights or anything, but he says their rape gang inquiry has identified 85 local authorities in which gang-based sexual exploitation of children is taking place or has done so historically. Lots of survivors, family members, whistleblowers have approached his organisation, and they're looking at targeted exploitation by predominantly Pakistani men or gross negligence from public bodies. Now, we'd often heard of Rochdale, Rotherham and a few, and people thought that, they were a handful. We've learned in the last couple of years we're looking at 40 to 50 different town cities. They're now looking at 85 local authorities, and it's something that's been raised a lot lately, which is, what about London? London, with huge numbers of people from many different backgrounds, what are the odds that London hasn't got its own grooming gang problem? And now it appears that that is one of the places that is being looked at. It is really important. Look, he's doing this inquiry, looking into trying to get more information. You've got Maggie Oliver, who's one of the whistleblowers in Greater Manchester Police all those years ago. You've got the wonderful Maggie Oliver Foundation, and they are looking at basically bringing prosecutions of people who basically allowed this to continue to happen. There is still movement on this, isn't it? But this all comes down to, fundamentally, a lot of these men were British born but of Pakistani heritage. All of this ties in with, and all the stories about 1 in 7 sexual assaults in this country are now from foreign nationals. They may be living here legally, but they are foreign nationals. This all ties into the idea of people coming to this country who don't want to obey the law, who are bringing their own cultural differences with them, instead of saying, right, I'm leaving that behind, I'm now going to take part in the cultural norms of the country I'm arriving in. These stories all tie in together.
It does. I think the other thing that ties it in together is the extent to which the state has tolerated this, has turned a blind eye to it, has refused to talk about it, has demonised people who did want to talk about it. In the case of the grooming gangs, I think there's plenty of evidence now that particular police forces, in effect,
covered it up.
Turned a blind eye. It's almost too weak to describe it in such terms because of the horrendous sort of judgments that were made there. And that is such the core of the problem. You have the issue itself, and then you have the refusal to admit it's an issue, the demonisation. That's over now. I really think, people talk about the Overton window moving. It's been kicked in on a lot of these issues. People are not willing to put up with the smears and the silencing. You've got people willing to vote in ways that they might never previously have considered. It's easy to forget this now, but in a very short time, Nigel Farage has gone from someone who was a very influential political player, but someone who his parties were really a kind of pressure valve on the Tories.
Yeah, he was sort of dragging the Tories kicking and screaming to some vaguely sensible policies they didn't actually execute.
He's now the presumptive next Prime Minister. This has happened in the space of a couple of years, and I think it's because of the fact that all of these issues put together, and the sense that people felt that no matter what they said, no matter what they did, no matter who they voted for, nothing would change. All of that has produced a completely different political landscape now. And however these things shake out electorally remains to be seen, but this is a very different world than it was in a couple of years ago. And
it's a slow process. When I voted for Brexit in 2016, I didn't think overnight. People go, oh yeah, where's your land of milk and honey? That's not how it worked. The key right in a democracy is not just to elect people that you want to do your bidding. It's to kick out the people who don't do what the public want. That's what people did again and again. When they made the choice, not happy with the Tories, but definitely not Jeremy Corbyn, thank you very much. Boris Johnson was elected with Nigel Farage's help. He stood down candidates to allow people that there was one vote for Brexit, and it was Boris Johnson full stop in most constituencies. He gifted the premiership to Boris Johnson, who threw it away. Yes, he got Brexit done. He had his hands tied behind his back by Theresa May, still one of the worst prime ministers in British history. We are where we are. But the point is, the Tories can fail to do it, fine. Labour can fail to do it, fine. But you will lose the next election. Full stop. End of. The British people are fed up. We have been very, very, very well behaved. We have stayed calm. We have not seen riots on the streets over these issues. We really haven't. You know, Southport was an exception. We have seen, you know, there's a lot of calm about this, but people are fed up and they are angry. And again, I think this is all part of the whole, you know, the flying the colours, you know, people putting the England flag up and just saying, you know what, we're fed up of being told we're racist. We're fed up of being told our flag's racist. We're fed up of being told that everything we want is wrong and that we should become multicultural and we should celebrate every other culture and every other heritage and everything else, but not our own. And we're fed up with it and we want to be put first. And you know what? In no other country would that be seen as a weird thing to say or think.
No, absolutely, and I think it's also why so much serious pressure is now on reform to properly deliver. There's always been questions.
That's going to be the question mark.
Yeah, exactly. Over, you know, do they actually have the answers? Have they got enough people around them to?
Yeah, but everyone says, but you haven't got the competence of the existing parties. Yeah. Well, they're supposedly competent and existing. How's that working out for us?
And I think we've got to almost absent the other parties from this discussion in a sense, because people need to feel that if a reform government does eventually come to power in whatever shape or form, that it will actually deliver, that we won't see the kind of disaffection we would see potentially if they just flopped.
I think there's going to be very hard because they're going to work against the mob. I'll say this right now on camera, and I'll say this to Nigel Farage right now. I will leave this job and I will come and work in government to push this policy through, because I'm willing to take all the flack. I'm willing to take all the name calling. I don't care. I've had it for years and I've been talking about this issue since, about 2000. I've got a long track record on this. I am absolutely willing to go into government on a non-party political basis, go into government to help get that job done, because I think that job needs doing. I'll swear to you right now, I will happily do that. Happy to take on the civil service, happy to take on the House of Lords, happy to take on the human rights lawyers, happy to do that, because this is a job that we need doing. And if we want our country to stay the country that it almost still is for our children, for the future, I'm afraid this is what we're going to have to do. It's going to have to be your, you know, all hands on deck, you know, and we're going to have to do it. And I think it involves everybody. You know, don't just talk the talk, walk the walk. There we are. That's my offer to you, Nigel. Anyway, 11:26 is at the time. I did just want to get you just on Angela Rayner and her 3 homes. Burgeoning property empire we're talking about. Everyone keeps talking about. I couldn't get that excited about this story. No. I was sitting on holiday going, I mean, she owns 2 homes.
Yeah.
A lot. I mean, I only own 1. I have to say, I'd love to buy a second home. I'm not sure. I don't know when you spend the time there. Sounds like a lot of hassle having to deal with 2 sets of lecky bills and everything else to me. But there we are. But she's been under a lot of criticism. But she is nevertheless someone. You know, she has to pay double accounts tax or whatever. She bought a place with Hove, Brighton Hove area. £700,000-800,000. Given her salary, I'm kind of wondering how she's got the money for that. She's got a place in Ashton-under-Lyme, her constituency. She's got a free Grace and Favour home, but she doesn't own that home. But she is a hypocrite, isn't she? Because she has talked about how second home owners are basically, you know, they're pricing. You know, she's on this, you know, big salary, 6-figure salary in London, and she comes down and buys a property for that price, a flat in the Hove. Well, lots of locals in that area, they won't have that sort of money. So she's doing exactly the thing she criticises other people for.
Well, I mean, like you, I struggle to get too upset about this. Is the first point. I mean, it is her second home rather than her third. It's also the fact that you know, when it comes to the charges of hypocrisy, I understand it, because the general message that the Labour Party have been giving off is one that is very kind of anti-second homes. But at the same time, what they basically did was implement policies that the Tory government had already mooted, which is to give local councils a bit more power to add kind of premiums to people who've got second homes, to make it that little bit more expensive for them. Incidentally, Brighton and Hove Council have those policies in place, and she is paying that elevated rate. So in the grand scheme of things, is it the biggest thing to get upset about? No, but any whiff of hypocrisy around this Labour government is particularly toxic, because there has been such a strong gust of it ever since they came into power.
Absolutely, and they always picked up the Tories on it. So, you know, you pay your money, you take your choice.